Assalamu alaikum, peace. It's Fatimah, Coach Fatimah, 1/3 of Outstanding Personal Relationships. For those of you that are new, welcome, welcome, welcome to this Thursday's live webinar with none other than myself. What is this webinar about? This webinar is about how to share your husband without destroying your marriage. And we're going to get right into that and more. Make sure you guys have something to write with and write on for this awesome training. We're going to get into best practices for best results. So hold tight. I'll be back with you in just a moment. Alrighty. Welcome back. Once again, I'm Coach Fatimah. Assalamu alaikum, peace. 1/3 of Outstanding Personal Relationships. And I want to bring a special webinar to you all. It's about how to share your husband without destroying your marriage. How many of us can relate? I know I can. I know many of my clients have, and have done that work too. And they had to think about that question as well. So welcome. I know it's not easy to receive this information for some, but that's okay. We're going to get through it together. And I wanted to make sure that I don't want to feel like everybody knows who I am, because they might not. So I'm the initial wife to Coach Nazir. Just for timeline's sake, I don't say that to impress you, but I just want to make sure that you guys have the timeline. Make sure you also let me know where you are tuning in from to get this awesome information that I'll be sharing with you this evening. And this is about, let's be real, this is really about how to thrive in polygyny and not just merely simply survive polygyny. It's really important that we're very mindful what we say to ourselves about ourselves and our marriages and about our journey. So let me know down in the comments if you are excited to receive this information. I know I have been so excited for the past week to bring another live event to you all and discussing this, because we want to keep the conversation going, because we know polygyny does not get its fair airplay. And if we don't have the conversation, or we don't start the conversation, the likelihood of it being had can just minimize a great deal. So let's get right off into this very quickly and effectively. So a few very key important areas, and let's get right off into it, is the perspective of our husband and ourselves, purpose that we have in our lives, and the peace that we want to ultimately find. So again, I want to welcome you to this webinar, and we're going to go through a few things very quickly. Make sure, again, you have something to write with and write on. So yes, polygyny, how to share your husband without destroying your marriage. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to do an overview about that specific topic: perspective, purpose, and peace, sharing your husband, a closer look. We're going to be discussing communication skills for successful relationships, building trust as well. It's a very big deal. We all know that. We're all aware of that. People have asked me oftentimes, how do I do it? I'm going to get into that as we go. So the purpose of this is to share this information in the areas of polygyny and making sure we're keeping our polygyny education going. Where does that start with? Understanding that this is about relationship education. I know it's not a one-stop shop type of thing. When we're going through relationships and we're having the relationships that we have in our marriages with our spouses and our husbands specifically, are the ones practicing polygyny, or the practice of having more than one wife. It's about gaining more information so that we have the knowledge and that we have the skills to apply the best practices in our life and becoming more familiar. I know for me, I wasn't familiar about polygyny. I was familiar with it, but not the actual day-to-day inner workings of it. As a practicing Muslim woman, I knew that this was an option for my husband specifically, and many Muslim men and men of other faiths, because polygyny predates Islam. And so it's been practiced for a long, long time. And I know that as a Muslim, I've heard it a lot over the years. How do you feel about it? What do you think about it? I never had an issue with that. It's just you hear so many horror stories, you start to fear it a bit. So we want to hear the success stories versus the absolute failure stories or scenarios. This is an interactive education that you'll be receiving for this evening with this specific topic, especially. So get excited. And I want to know how many of you are excited to get this information. Again, this is not always easy to hear or talk about or discuss about sharing our husbands with another wife, but we will get into that and what we can do to start implementing different practices, healthy practices immediately. So it's interactive. So I'll be asking you some questions, seeing what you think, and just getting more and more into the topic. So off we go. I'm excited because I never thought I would actually be discussing polygyny at any time in my life, much less coaching and counseling, and being someone that has really been around so many women of different walks of life. Oftentimes people say, oh, you coach Muslim women. No, I don't. I really don't. I've had women of all faiths come to me and get coaching and counseling from me. So you can go to coachfatimah.com for details on that as well. Some materials that you might need. If you're a VIP, you will need your worksheets. Make sure you have, again, something to write with and write on. The willingness to learn is valuable, because if we don't have the willingness to learn and we feel like we're here against our will, how much of the information are we going to absorb, retain, and apply? Also, this is probably one of the biggest things I knew that I needed when I was receiving so much information and doing the research about polygyny years and years ago, was a peaceful state of mind. So I lessened the distractions. I made sure I was able to breathe and carry myself through and say, okay, you have this. Let's receive this information, because I had some really amazing mentors and I traveled and I did so much to really get the information and put it into my life, into my practice every day. Was it a journey? Did it happen overnight? It did not happen overnight. We don't tell anything that is a plant, that is a child, that is a person, that's an animal, hurry up and grow in one day. Get it over with. Let's get it. That's not how it works. So when we're trying to grow, it's a process, but understanding that consistency is key matters to the success of any marriage, whether you're in monogamy, whether you're in polygyny. Now, the Coach Fatimah method, I want to just discuss this kind of briefly. I'm here to help assist you in identifying key concepts. I'm straightforward pretty much with my techniques. I like to get to resolve. So I kind of shoot straight for the hip, not to be hurtful, but helpful. I encourage you to put these techniques into practice. I was one of my best guinea pigs was me. I was my one and only guinea pig. Pro tip, accountability is a superpower. Let's not downplay it nor diminish it. When we're able to say, look, I don't have this information. I don't know. I might have messed up. I might need to apologize. I might need to sit and hold myself accountable for my stuff that I do and become better. That feels really, really good, because then that shows a growth mindset. And that's where you get to your healing. Understanding that embracing change is okay for what it will make of you. I didn't think embracing change was one of the best things I ever wanted. avoiding change. And I said, I go through change, but I don't really want to go through this polygyny change. I don't really want to go through this journey. But as a Muslim woman, I knew that this was part of my journey. It was already written, it was going to happen. And it's made so much more out of me. And for those of you that might be wondering who I am, which is an awesome question, because I'm not going to be so arrogant as to think everybody knows who I am, because they don't. So let's get into who I am. You'll see a bunch of amazing, amazing people pictured here, but I want to share something with you. Everyone that is in these photos are very important people in my life, and they've been on my journey with me for some decades, for some maybe not so much. So I want to share something special with you about who I am, and maybe you can get to know me a little bit better. If you haven't been following us for a long time, or you're new to our channel or new to our content, I welcome you to enjoy the following. So with that, that's a little bit about me, guys. For again, those of you that are new, or those of you that are tuning into this How to Share Your Husband Without Destroying Your Marriage live webinar with myself, Coach Fatimah. So that's a little bit about me. Let me know down in the comments how many of you can relate to trying to understand change. Put a thumbs up in the comments if you can relate to that. I know I had to really pray for a couple things, was understanding and knowledge of the subject of polygyny. I think I spent a little bit of time kind of running from it, even though I knew some very basic information. I wanted to learn more. about whys and how-tos and so many different things, but there was nothing out there really for me to learn from. But with all of the traveling and all the investing that I had to do in researching and being a student, and I'm a forever student, and wanting to learn more about relationships, marriage, polygyny, and providing that for others has been really some of the most amazing work that I believe that I've ever done. It's really awesome to be able to sit in this space because I struggled with different things in polygyny and jealousies and emotions and my new normal. So I want to get into that in these very core areas for success in polygyny and getting some more understanding. So let's go right off into this right now. Thank you all for the salams. Ramadan Mubarak to those of you that are fasting this blessed month of Ramadan. May your fast be accepted and this month be beneficial to us all. Okay, now let's get into this. Perspective, purpose, and peace. Now, much of understanding perspective, purpose, and peace is under the umbrella that is a very strong one, is mindset mastery. Let's get into that very quickly. Let's talk about this. Now, with mindset mastery, let's go into perspective. One thing I had to learn is that men and women are not the same. Now, we know through biology we're not the same. We know by appearance we're not the same. Strength, whatever, we're not the same. One of the main things that I knew full well was an issue is that the perspective that men have in different areas, such as marriage, relationships, love, betrayal, trust, loyalty, and much more, are often different when it comes to polygyny specifically. So loyalty in polygyny might look different. Trust in polygyny, love in polygyny might look different between men and women. I found that a lot of what we believe as women, our husbands don't think about. It's not that they're mindless or void of critical thinking. It's that the way in which they process or perceive or their perspective on marriage and relationships and love is much different than ours. And that's not to say that their way is wrong. It is just different than ours. See, sometimes we want a husband, but we want him to love us as a woman does, with this tremendous amount or this ability to nurture in the way in which a woman does. I had to learn that about myself. I said, well, I want to kind of be answered how I'd answer. I want to kind of receive this hug the way I would want it to receive it, because that's acceptable, because that's the best way. No, that's not true. A man is going to hug. He's going to love. He's going to foster a relationship with his wife in the way in which men do it. And I had to, and I coach and counsel on how to receive that or be accepting of that. I said, oh, hello, he's different than me. He's not a woman. It's different for him. So understanding that the perspective of our spouses is important to the success of the marriage, because oftentimes when we don't understand that their perspective is different and we don't respect that fact, there can be a break in the marriage. So when we do, however, it'll deepen our connection, empathy, trust, respect, and endearment for one another. It must be difficult to be in a home that has hell in it because communication is broken down. There's no respect, there's no trust, there's no love, there's contempt. There's resentment that builds, right? Because the relationship is not being nurtured in a specific way to where both can be accepting of it, or one person is deciding to do the growth work and the other person is not. That can be extremely problematic to the point that the marriage finds itself fractured beyond repair in some cases. So let's quickly go over, not quickly, but let's go over purpose. Let's talk about the importance of purpose. Now, one thing I had to learn as a young wife of 20 years old is that my purpose changed. I said, well, my husband will work. I'll love him. We'll have our children. I'll take care of the home. I'll run a business if I want to. It'll be great. That was the vision I had in my mind because I came from brokenness twice. My grandmother and my grandfather broke up after my parents did. My parents broke up by the time I was 3, and then my grandparents suffered a divorce that needed to be. They needed to get divorced. They were not getting along. They didn't like each other anymore. They were best buddies toward the end, but I was entering high school. So that was a pivotal moment, if I could talk, for me as someone that was entering 9th grade. Everything was so new. The break of their marriage was new. So I had to understand that the vision that I had painted for what I wanted my family to look like would change over the years in my husband's eye. I said, well, he wanted more. And I said, well, it should be this way. I think this would be great. If we don't get divorced, if we have our children, it'll be great. We're all under the same roof. And he had came from a broken place too, as his parents got divorced. So he was understanding and very mature about that. And I really love that about him. But as a 20-year-old, I didn't understand the magnitude of my words at the time. So my purpose changed as I got older, as I did the growth work that I needed to do. So living in purpose is to understand that we must have some type of fulfillment or meaning to our specific existence outside of our spouse. So having direction and motivation and a sense of accomplishment is important. In addition to, it provides clarity because we have goals that are clear. We'll be motivated to see those goals through because we want to be consistent if we want to achieve our goals. We'll have a more meaningful life. So I couldn't just be a wife and a mother. I had to have something outside of that. What was my life's work going to be outside of that? Although those are so honorable. And I didn't want to ever diminish that or lose sight of that because those were 2 major goals that I accomplished. But then what next? What next? So my world couldn't revolve around the relationship with my husband and my children. I had to have something for me. What were my spiritual goals? What were my educational goals? My physical goals? My financial goals? Although I had a husband, did I want something outside of that? Financially, what did I want to do? What did I want to achieve? And the beauty about this is it boosts resilience when we live with purpose. And we go, okay, I have a goal. My why is strong enough to make me cry. I have something that I'm working toward. And I love that about having a life that's purposeful. And it also allowed me in polygyny specifically to not hyper focus on my husband. If I have a calendar, if I have something I'm doing for me, that mattered. That matters to the success of my individual life. Because by a show of hands, who wants a mediocre marriage? Who, leave it in the comments, which one of you wants a mediocre marriage? I want my marriage to be outstanding. But I had to do the work. I couldn't just jump from, oh, I don't have purpose to outstanding. There had to be some legwork in between. So men and women practice purpose differently. And I had to learn that again as I grew into my marriage. I had to understand that the drive that my husband had and the purpose in which he was living his life was different from mine. His picture was different from mine. Not that it was completely foreign to me, no, because we had the same common goals to build and raise a healthy family that was close and tied closely to Islam. We wanted that for us as Muslims. We didn't want to suffer divorce. We wanted our marriage to be awesome. And we worked very hard at that. And we raised our children together, and we were very hands-on parents. So I didn't feel like I was by myself. And we had a pretty good little tiny support system with some of the women in our family. So that helped as well. But we knew we had the same common goals. So we're both capable of having a clear sense of direction. Both sexes are capable of that. but it's in different ways. So men specifically tend to prioritize things differently than we might. So it might be their career success because they know, okay, I have a family. And what if you're at a stay-at-home mom and it's different for you? Like for me specifically, I didn't have to prioritize career so much as I was prioritizing my family and being a wife and a mother. I loved that part of my life. When I was in it, I was going, okay, I got this little side thing I'm doing in my art and things like that, and certain commissions and certain hobbies that can bring in some extra income. I love that. But I was not the breadwinner. That's not the goal that I had for myself. I was like, that's not something that I want to do. I want to be in my children's lives. So prioritizing those things is different from men to women. And we might socialize, again, caretaking and family, and the men might prioritize their careers. And of course, their families are part of that because the career provides, provision for the family. So one thing about men in polygyny, and I really want to drive this point home, is that this is a hard example. This might be more of a hard example. Men may feel as though practicing polygyny specifically is giving them some purpose. One thing that I learned that I love, that I embrace so much about what Coach Nazir said, and this was a while ago, he said it made him more. Because my co-wife and I know that a man that practices polygyny has to be twice the man. And I never heard a man express being a husband in polygyny in that way. He said he wanted to become more. And I never thought of that. What if him becoming more meant he needed to practice polygyny? That is part of his journey. But that also meant I would have had to share a husband. But I said, you know what? You share him with the world. You're sharing him with this world. You're sharing him with your children. You're sharing him with his parents, his siblings, his job, his businesses, his brothers in Islam, his friends, his acquaintances, places that he has to go. I was constantly sharing him. But because it was packaged in polygyny, that changed things, because then that meant, okay, he's providing for another wife in a way in which I'm not ready for yet, but I knew he could do it. My faith in him was strong enough to say, I'm not afraid of this because he can't do it. I feared it because I knew he could do it. But I said, he's going to be helping somebody else though. Right? That was the reality of it for me at the time. And if you can relate to this, let me know down in the comments, because I knew it was so interesting for me, and I knew it was going to push me in ways that I didn't feel like I was ready for, but I didn't know that I was going to be on a growth journey and that it was going to continue forever to the end of my days. So him being stretched was polygyny, more so than just monogamy, because we're pro morals or monogamy, for monogamy and polygyny. So we've been in monogamy, now we're in polygyny, and the men practice polygyny. I do not. And they did a study, and we're going to go into talking about peace. And they did a study where they found that women tend to prioritize emotional intimacy and connection in their relationships. That's major for women. We're emotional beings. We like to lead oftentimes with emotion. And oftentimes our husbands will say, I think. They won't say, I feel as though. And that's another thing that I had to pay close attention to in my own personal life. I said, well, yeah, he says, I think a lot. That doesn't mean men are void of emotion. They do have emotion. They just might not lead with it. And we all know when men oftentimes in public become overly emotional, traffic stops, people pay attention. They want to know what's going on. They want to know what the problem is. They want to know if they're safe. So, their emotions are different. That doesn't mean they're all out of control and overly emotional. They can't control themselves. No, they do have them. They just don't typically lead with them, but they're there. They're full well intact. Now, sometimes people shut down because they don't feel heard, and then it will look and appear as though they don't have emotions. And I remember this quote that my grandfather used to say all the time. He said, "If a man is not talking, he's thinking like HELL." He said it all the time, and I didn't know what that meant in my youth. And then I said, "I know what he meant." It's a very heavy quote. It's a very heavy statement to make, and he was under that belief, and so am I. I understand it now. Now, since we typically as women prioritize emotional intimacy and connection in that way, Coach Nazir always says this, and it's always true. Um, Men are seduced by what they see, and women are seduced by what they hear. And I know I'm a woman that's seduced by what I hear. You know, words of affirmation, or "I got you," "you did a great job," or building me up in that way. I love that. I love poetry. I love kind words. I love to see people that I don't even know connect in that way through kind words and through celebrating and edifying one another. Now, this is the flip side. Now, let's get into this. While men may prioritize practical aspects such as specific shared responsibilities, we're going to share in respecting each other. We might share in the responsibilities at home, possibly sharing the responsibilities of raising our children, doing the work within the relationship. We all want those things, but you see how it doesn't say prioritize emotional intimacy and connection in that way. We're different from one another. And in some cases, sexual satisfaction. Because let's just do a quick disclaimer. Many times, many times, and I'm going to talk about it, people will say, well, this is a sex thing. Polygyny is just specifically a sex thing. You have to bring more than your parts to have a successful marriage. There has to be more to us than our private parts that we're bringing. Men don't just say, well, you know what, you have the anatomy that I want, but go ahead on and disrespect me in every conversation we have. Keep my house a mess. Keep yourself a mess. Doesn't matter to me. Keep my children a mess. That's great. I love it. I think it's attractive. Talk about me crazy behind my back. Bring people into my house that I don't want to. I mean, it's so many different things, but I've never heard a man saying, I'll embrace all of that toxicity, but just bring me this body and these parts, and then we will have a successful marriage. I've never heard this. Because it's not. Men are, we like to think because they're strong, physically more strong than us, that there's nothing else going on with them. They're very shallow people. They lack critical thinking skills. All they want from a woman is her body. I had to provide way more than just the physical part of marriage. And so did my husband. There had to be more. We don't just look at a man and say, just bring me the physical. Don't provide in any other area. It won't be problematic. I promise you. Just bring me your physical body whenever I need it, and I'll do all of the rest of this relationship. I don't need you for anything else. You're dismissed. That's not how that works, and it doesn't work effectively if that's what somebody is leading with. Now, let's get right back into this. And we also express emotions to seek validation oftentimes as women. And it's not a tool, or should not be a tool, to manipulate. Because oftentimes, if that's the case, just because somebody is not expressing the fact that they can see manipulation happening doesn't mean it's not happening. Now, I don't want to be dismissive of our feelings as women, because I have them. I'm a woman. And sometimes we don't want our husbands to fix anything. We just want to be heard. We just want our emotions to be heard and get a hug, and get some maybe reassurance that, okay, we're going to work on this together. And that's of great importance. And I don't want to abandon the fact that work has to happen on different ends of the marriage with our spouses, but we do different work with one another. And the quote, work with the willing, that matters in any aspect of marriage. Work with the willing, because if you're not willing to do your part, and you just say, look, this is on you. You screwed this up. You married again. You fix this. That's not how that works. So giving yourself permission to participate in your marriage is really paramount to the future success of that marriage. Nobody says to somebody else, I'll give you the example of weight loss. Get over here and lose my weight for me. What's taking so long? Because if you said that to another person, everybody else would look at you like there was something happening with you mentally, because that's not how weight loss works. But the success of marriage is supposed to work that way? No, it doesn't. We have to participate in the success of our marriage. It is a group activity. It's crowd participation. So to think it just falls in our lap does not happen. Now let's get into something that might be triggering for some, but it has to be said. Why don't we want to share our husbands? There could be a laundry list, but these are some reasons why women typically don't want to share their husbands. I understand when a woman doesn't want to share a good man to a certain degree. To a certain degree, I didn't want to share my good man because cultural and religious beliefs, some people grapple with that. Jealousy, emotional attachment, feeling disrespected, or there's a violation of trust. This next one is major. Fear of loss. We think we will lose our husbands to another wife, or they will abandon us, devastate our children. The list can really go on and on and on. And it can be scary to a certain degree. Absolutely. Because change, one reason people don't like change is because they fear it, because they don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. I can't embrace change. But what if it's a good thing? One thing I had to ask myself, and this was a major question that I had to ask myself, and I've shared this, and I invite you to ask yourself this question. And then I want to see what you put in the comments. Who is your first love? Now, here is a picture of my first love. What would your answer be? My very first love. So I want to see in the comments what you would put for your answer. You don't have to tell names. You don't have to do any of that. Maybe even keep it to yourself if you want to. You can do that. Now, for me, specifically, this was a question that I had gotten wrong. The first love that is in this picture is Fatimah. It's me. And I had to learn that that's important to understand that. Because I'll give you an example. When we're in flight and we're in an airplane, they say, put your mask on you first, not on your neighbor. You got to provide yourself with care before you provide it to anyone else on this plane. So it doesn't work backwards. You are to care for your person, then the person next to you. I had to invest in myself first and then say, okay, now, since I've gotten up this morning, I've exercised, I've taken care of me, I've given myself something to eat, then I can go off into my marriage and provide something for my husband, provide something for my children as their mother, because I've done the work of taking care of me. That doesn't mean take these obnoxious long hours and hours. Well, you know what? I'll talk to you people after about 4 hours and then I'll be available to you. No, it's saying, I'm going to have some tea. Would you like some tea? Can I offer you something? But I know in my mind, I've offered myself something first. Sometimes it's a breath and saying, take a deep breath, go pray to God and go pray or go offer salat, come back, then have this conversation. Offer someone else some grace after I've offered it to myself. It doesn't mean I'm offering grace to Fatimah and no one else. Part of sharing a man or your husband in polygyny is understanding that grace and patience and time and working on yourself is vital to the success of your monogamous marriage with your husband. So I had to understand that. Now, this is something really important. Understanding that we don't want to share our husband because we feel threatened in certain critical areas. Now, I'm going to share these with you all. those areas we might think we're going to lack the connection with them, or we'll be replaced, or our family will be replaced. Who's going to, is our co-wife going to take care of our children? Are we going to be outmothered? Is there going to be unfair treatment? Will there be sexual abandonment? That's a big one. What will other people say about it? Will it end in divorce? And some people have even brought up disease. Now, one of the main things that I had to deal with is, what will the people say? And the people said some things to me. Are you two divorced? I saw your husband. Did you guys get divorced? Because they saw him with my co-wife. And I said, no. Oh, you're not divorced? No, I'm not. And then, well, how are you? And I remember this day I was really, really happy, and was with my daughters, and we were at a department store in the mall. And this lady that I knew from network marketing, I hadn't seen her in years. She was a cashier. And I always knew her to be pleasant. And she led with I knew she just wanted to ask. I said, here it comes. Here it comes. I could feel it. And she said, are you guys divorced? After we got through the little, how are you type question. And I said, no, we're not. And I looked at her just like that. And she says to me, I said, it's coming. Here comes the question. She says to me, but are you happy? No, she didn't say it. She said, how do you feel? I said, I'm happy. And she says, but are you happy? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I knew I was doing work on me. And I had accepted the fact that my husband had another wife, because I told myself, your husband has another wife, and he's supposed to be where he is. Just like he's supposed to be where he is when he's with me, when he's at our home that we built together. He's supposed to be at his home that he built with her together. And that changed the narrative in my mind. That changed the energy, because what I did in that instance with that cashier, with that woman that I had seen for so long, was get her to understand that I control this conversation, that I control how I feel about my marriage. And I didn't need anyone to dictate to me how that should be. I let her know what I felt. I'm happy. Does that mean I sit up and I'm happy all the time? No, that's not what that meant. That meant that I was doing my work and I was happy with the results of that work, although I still had room to grow and space to learn. Still, and I still do. That's a very liberating feeling, when you know that someone is trying to pick your brain and try to figure out what's going on in your marriage that has nothing to do with them, that they won't benefit from knowing anything about you. You don't owe them your story. Absolutely not. But I had time that day to tell her I was happy. And I looked good. I felt good. And I went home feeling good. I didn't go home feeling defeated, whether she wanted me to or not. It wasn't for her to say. And that's so beautiful when you reach that point. Now, let's get into this. Let's keep going. Let's keep the conversation going. This is a great exercise that I want you all to do to build connection with your spouse. This is a 7-breath forehead connection repair exercise. Now, one thing you're going to do is respectfully grab your spouse at the appropriate time. At the appropriate time. I have to say this because oftentimes when we want to see if something's going to work and we're hurting and we're emotional about something, we want to grab our spouse and say, come on over here and talk to me, do this exercise, and we're going to have this conversation right now, whether you're ready for it or not. Because sometimes when we do that and we dump all the emotion on someone, especially our spouse, specifically our spouse, and then say, now you fix it or do something with it. How can someone know what to do with all that emotion when it's dumped on them all at once? This is what you're going to do. Grab your spouse very lovingly and respectfully at the appropriate time. Step 2, you're going to look into each other's eyes for 7 breaths. And by the end of it, you're going to share. Now, this is the 3rd step. Share 7 things you are grateful for, which they provided for you, or only that they can provide for you. This is The beginning of this exercise is helping with connection and nonverbal communication. Because when you can look at your spouse and take 7 breaths lovingly, and then by the end of it, share with them 7 things that only they can provide. There's one person on planet Earth that can provide me with specific things in my marriage, and that is my husband. Nobody else can provide me with those things. There's much more than that, but part of being married is knowing that there's another person that has a set of needs of their own as well. So to exchange what they've given you or what they've provided with for you is important, because sometimes they need to hear it and you need to hear the sound of your own voice, exchanging that with them. It's a really amazing, amazing tool. Now, let's break down the psychology of sharing. A few things that I needed to understand, and I coach and I counsel about this as well. Now, before I get to that, let me know in the comments how many of you enjoyed that and how many of you are going to, by a show of hands, do the 7 breath exercise. Now we're going to go back over to the psychology of sharing. Let's get right off into it. A few things that I had to really want to share or drive home is the psychology of sharing, taking the stigma away from the word sharing. One thing I had to learn is the my mentality, my husband, my children, my this, my car, my house. Now, those things are true. However, when we become obsessed with our husband and our children and we my, there's a certain unattractiveness that comes with that, because then that is that hyper focus that I was talking about earlier. There's a hyper focus that happens, right? So then we'll go, where's my husband? Where's my? So I started doing something, and this was not easy. I started saying my co-wife, I started saying our husband, because what I'm doing is actively taking away the stigma of the word sharing. We like anything that we're going to share that we love. Yeah, share half your sandwich with me. Share your notes from that class. Let's share a hug. Let's share a vacation. Let's share some time. Those things. But when it is packaged within polygyny, it becomes problematic because we are used to a certain type of culture that says monogamy only, anything else, that's it. But the monogamy holds a man accountable and says, look, one wife and whatever outside kids, it helps the man. It helps the man that can say, okay, oh, you just take care of this wife. And if I pepper kids anywhere else with any other women, forget them, forget those women. They don't mean anything because the law says, monogamy only. Yeah. You just focus on her. Don't worry about this one over here, because we don't marry them. We just let them blow in the wind, and we're not going to add any honor to those women and those children. I know how that kind of feels because my parents did not get married, and I was known as the bastard one, my brother and I. But since he lived in another state, it was just me, because he had a different mom. Because we don't have to place honor here. That's problematic. It can become a huge problem, because what is said for those women and those children that don't get to have the label of wife and the lifestyle of wife, because the powers that be said, no, we do a monogamy. Although polygyny worked for centuries before they decided that. It worked, whether people want to believe it or not. So understanding, another thing is that's really powerful, is understanding that our relationships must change, and they will. I love what Coach Nazir says when he says he wanted to practice polygyny because it would make him more. And it did. It did. I've been here a long time. I've been married to him 28 years. It has made him more. We've been in polygyny, for those of you that might be new, for 13. And I've seen him become more, but he wanted to. He wanted to become more. He wanted to provide and protect and love. And people go, well, I don't know how you can love more than one wife at once. What do you mean? What does that mean? How? I have 7 children. I have 4 daughters, 3 boys. Now, I love my daughters all at the same time. All at the same time. I'm loving them right now as I'm bringing this webinar to you at the same time. I love my co-wife. The same time I love my daughters. I love my bonus daughter. The same time I'm loving my daughters. And guess what? I love my husband all at the same time. Loving. Okay? And my sons and my bonus sons at the same time. So when people go, that's impossible for him to love you and her. No, it's not. Because guess what is happening right now? It's been happening for a long time. We don't say that in any other instance than we do in polygyny. It's impossible. He can't. Men have pretty big hearts. That doesn't mean that they don't make mistakes. That doesn't mean that they're not still learning. They are. And sometimes they don't know where to go. They can go to outstandingpersonalrelationships.com. And we have a community. So you can visit that at polygamyeducation.com for details. So let's go back over to, because I could just go on and on about this. And it's really important to understand. So sharing time takes respect on your journey. Respect your journey. Sharing takes time. Respect your journey. You are under an obligation to work on yourself. We share our spouses, yes, with the world already. And I had to ask one of my clients, do you want your husband to win? So yes, you can see polygamyeducation.com at the bottom. And one thing I love about marriage is I wanted to share in the success of my marriage. I said, I want my marriage to be successful and I want to participate in that. I want us both to. So let's review. Maintaining mindset mastery. Husbands are not wives, and we're not husbands, and they won't love us like women would love. I remember a friend of mine, she was like, I didn't need a husband, I needed a wife. And it was a joke. And she and I cracked up because she wanted to be nurtured in a way that her husband didn't know how. And it was a joke and it was funny. And we're both Muslim women from completely different backgrounds, completely different ethnicities. But I got what she said. She was like, I don't need a husband, I need a wife. And we laughed. But we got the fact that they're not us. Men, their perspective on polygyny is not the same as the one that we hold. They don't want to see their marriages break up. They said 80% of marriages are filed by women, by the wife. And I said, why? And I remember something powerful my own husband said to my grandmother, and I want to share this with you all. My grandmother said, I want to talk to him without you there. Well, I didn't die. I could stood on my head. And my grandmother said, I don't want you there. I wasn't there. And she said, well, he told me he ain't going nowhere. And I felt so good. And I knew that. But to hear her say it, because she didn't like this situation, but to hear her say it. But she's also the same woman that said, isn't it allowed in y'all religion? My grandmother raised me. You saw her on the screen. And she was a powerhouse of a woman, all of 5'2", Southern and strong. And she did not sugarcoat anything. And maybe that's where I get it from. But she didn't sugarcoat a thing. And she shot straight from the hip. And so did my grandpa. So maybe that's why their marriage didn't make it. But I understood her when she said, look, he ain't going nowhere. Felt good to me. Felt good to me because it changed my outlook on the success, the future success of my own marriage. And let's meet our husbands with outside of the wife label, showing up as a friend like I did with Coach Nyla, and I asked him, was he happy? I care about if I'm happy too. Shoot. But I wanted to ask him. And he said, yeah. And I was like, that doesn't mean he wasn't unhappy. He was unhappy before. It's just he was being stretched in this way. And when a man comes from big numbers and a large family like he does, he comes from his relatives on both sides, the Puerto Rican side, Black side, they're huge numbers. I said he would want to do this. This is part of him, to want to expand his family and love more and do more and provide more. I had a sister that older than me in my community. She said more men in our community need to practice polygyny, Fatima. And she was writing and she said, including your husband. This was a long time. This had to be close to 19 years ago, maybe longer. And I was like, yo, what? She was like, yes, absolutely. And I said, well, you know what? I had to come to grips with the fact that I knew he could do it. Let me tell you all something. I had every confidence here and here that he's in the other room, could see polygyny through. Does that mean mistakes weren't made? It's one thing if a man is trying to hurt you versus you being hurt and they weren't trying to. Weren't setting out to. And they're sitting there with you every step of the way while you heal yourself. They can't fix you. They can't. If they could give you peace, they'd snap and give you peace, because it would not only provide you peace, it would provide them peace. Because if he could fix you, he would have did it already. But they can't. And they can't do it like we would do it for ourselves, because we live in this body, in our bodies all the time, right? So put a thumbs up if you relate to that, because I know I do. I know I do. So let's proceed. I love this quote. Our marriage is strong as we decide to make it. It is ours. No one has a say in the matter outside of us. People ask all the time, how did you do it? I had to understand that I had a say in my marriage. And I had to get in the game, which it's not a game at all. I had to get in the game and do my work and do my part. Because if it's a partnership, sometimes it's 80-20. Sometimes it's he's up, I'm down, or I'm up, he's down, and we got to uplift one another, or pick up the slack somewhere. And that's an honorable thing to do. And he does the same thing with his marriage with Coach Nyla. He's just all invested me and no, this is healthy practices in polygyny. I want to make sure that I thank you all for attending this webinar. I hope you all got some gems. I definitely know that this is not easy. However, this is not impossible. Polygyny is not impossible. And once we understand that, we can just grow through it, but knowing that we must grow is important. So if you are interested in living that life that is truly fulfilling, now this goes to say you have to do your work. I had to do mine. I'm still doing it. Make sure you visit learnwithcoachfatimah.com for details. I created a program called the Nourishing Fulfillment 12-week coaching program, and it is incredible. And I want to make sure that I share something with you all about it. And it's a very sentimental thing for me to do it. And you guys know me to not be much of a crier. I do cry and I have emotions. I'm not going to act like I don't, but I want to share this with you from some of my wonderful, satisfied clients. This one is from Victoria Caldwell. Coach Fatimah saved my life. And I know the backstory of this, and I get choked up reading this. So I'm going to power through it. But I love this sister so much. Her counseling was what I needed. What I leaned on, I should say, when I was going through my darkest times. She advised me on things that didn't know I would need until the time came. It was her advice and her counsel that kept me together. Allah knew in his perfect wisdom that I would need her, and he put her in my life. That one last week, if you were here for this webinar on how to share your husband without destroying your marriage, you would know that that was tough for me to read. I had to take a moment. I'm a little bit better this week, but I just smile every time I read it because I know her backstory, and it's not for me to share on this platform, but I was in her life at a time where she felt her lowest, and to hear her success story and to see the success that she's having now in her life, it just speaks to my heart on a level that I won't get into now because I have to close out this webinar, but I want to share this with you all and I'll be on here crying. So Rebecca Bison says, Coach Fatimah is a coach who has put in the work and actually gone through the ups and downs. She has done the work. Hey, I try my best. I try my best indeed. I'm going to always be a student of this life and the work that I need to do for myself, because I know I'm work in progress. Aisha Day says, Coach Fatimah is warm through her empathy, inspiring by her knowledge, and oh, so funny in her humor. With every session, she inspired me through her expertise, gifted me and with clear guidance and simple directives. I would recommend Coach Fatimah to all women, whether single, married, monogamously, or polygamously, Muslim or of other faith. She has the heart, the skill, and knowledge that accommodates all of us. These women are very special women in my life. It's not that I just sat up and provided so much for them. They are incredible women, and I thank them for allowing me to connect with them with my 12-week coaching program. It's such a heartwarming thing to know that for me, as their coach, in knowing they're all from different walks of life and they've struggled and they found their way through and they're doing so great. As an update, I would like to share that with you all. They're doing really, really well. And I'm so proud of them. And this work is very rewarding. However, I know that I was put here to help others. I like helping others. I like talking about these things. I don't mind not being liked or not being popular. It doesn't matter to me, because this information can't get in front of the wrong people. And the right people will pick it up and say, you know what, this helped me. And thank you all so much in the comments for leaving such kind comments for me. I really appreciate it. You all make this work so worth doing, because I know you all are paying attention. I know this is not easy. We're going to keep the conversation going next week as I continue with this topic. So be sure you tune in next week. I want to thank you, and I can't thank you enough for being here and listening and being accepting of it, even though this is not easy. Again, it's not impossible with the right intentions and a healthy willingness to win and learn and grow and become someone that's a forward thinker versus a solo thinker. Forward thinker says, look, this is not easy, but I got to go into the future, because remember, your past doesn't need you. Your future does. I will be back, inshallah, next week. Ramadan Mubarak to those of you that said Ramadan Mubarak. And thank you for all the positive feedback. Remember, this is a journey. Embrace this journey, embrace this education. And if you are so inclined and interested in it, make sure you head on over to our polygamy education campus at polygamyeducation.com for details, and you can get in on that as well. I'm going to leave you guys off with some GLC. Make sure that you are growing intentionally, loving fearlessly, and connecting on a higher level every single day. I'm Coach Fatimah. I will see you guys next week in the next one. Assalamu alaikum. Peace. Isn't it frustrating when you think about your husband that you've had for a long time, or maybe even a short time, and then they finally decide that they want to practice polygyny? Then you go, what am I supposed to do with that once you decide you want to practice polygyny? Am I going to be thrown outside? Are you going to divorce me? What's going to happen to me? You go through all these emotions and all this frustration and trying to figure it out. And then you're on the emotional roller coaster going round and round and round with your own ruminating thoughts. You feel defeated. You feel jealous. You go, what if she's younger? What if she's smarter? What if she's taller? What if she's smaller? What if he likes her more? Those are some of the things that I found extremely frustrating, and I did not know what to do as a wife for so long and a mother. And then I said, well, we can kind of have some fun together alone and all these things like that. But then no, he had this idea of polygyny. So I said, well, where do I fit in? And then I discovered that I had to make a choice. I said, I can either stay in a place of hurt and feeling betrayed and confused and dealing with my own emotions and this new normal that he decided to sign up for. So with that, I said, that's enough. I don't want that anymore for me. So I made a big decision, and that was to make sure that I read the books, healed myself, did some self-introspection, seeing what I needed to do to celebrate me and celebrate my own marriage and uplift my own self-esteem and travel and do all these different things and meet different mentors and read so many things and so many books and so many articles and do my due diligence. So with that, because I did that, I also decided to create the Nourishing Fulfillment Counseling Program. I wanted to be a solution, and I wanted to be part of my own solution and help others in the process. I know what it's like going on that emotional roller coaster and not knowing that, okay, this is something that my husband wants to do. He wants to practice polygyny. What can you do? You can only control yourself because, again, you can't control anybody else. So with that, I want to make sure that I offer it to you as well. It's so important to understand that growth has to happen, and growth can't happen if we're stuck in our own comfort zone. So with the Nourishing Fulfillment Counseling Program, I make sure that I equipped others with the same things that I had in those same practices for best results with less legwork. So to learn more about my Nourishing Fulfillment Coaching and Counseling Program, visit me at CoachFatimah.com for details or hit that button below in order to apply. I will see you inside. Assalamu alaikum. Peace. Oh, this needs to be down. Love the channel.
How was the live stream?
It's good. It's good.